interfaces and how it will look like, and often we think about it with our students as well. And I divided into 4 topics that could actually go through. And the first one which comes to my mind is interfaces. Since we interact with computers now and maybe robots tomorrow, but the interfaces in general. So I would like maybe to ask the first question. Recently we have witnessed the fast coming back of VR and augmented reality. What will be the next step of designing spaces? I guess, Jan? You're the closest.
But I don't think I have an answer for that. I think, so it's not the first wave of the virtual reality hype that we have right now. It's at least second, and I think the hype is already quite over as well. Even though some new devices and some new technologies have been announced less than a year ago, but they, again, very quickly disappeared. But for me, the virtual reality as such, it's not a groundbreaking technology or improvement. It's an evolution of the display methods. And I don't know if, even though there was a huge hype around that, it hasn't really taken over. Not even in the design professions or in medicine or wherever there seemed to be a promise. It never happened, and I personally never believed that it's going to happen. And if you're asking me what is going to be the next hype, there I don't know. What we are observing right now is that we can talk to the computers in a natural language, and they pretend to understand. I'm not sure if they do understand. Or like, very often they give very funny answers to the questions, and there are misunderstandings that would never happen with a human being. But in a way, I think this is what we are going to see more often, that you would be able to not to be precise when you are asking your question or making a request. And this actually is changing the game, because until this moment, you needed certain expertise when you were talking to the computer. You had to learn something and understand how things work internally so that you can ask the right question. Even if you are searching something on the internet, you needed certain skill. You couldn't just type, "Hey computer," or "Hey internet, tell me something, I don't know, where is my friend right now?" It wouldn't give you an answer because you're asking a wrong question. But now you don't need any expertise whatsoever. And that's changing the game. And I'm observing this with, I don't know if it's a generational thing or a general thing across generations of people, but having technological skill is not, it's not the thing anymore. People do not have the technological skill. Even people who were born with their phone in their hands, like the smartphone existed when they were born, they don't have the skill that I would expect they would have with the device and the technology. And it seems that interfaces are actually going towards this direction. It is more and more accessible to people who do not need the skill to, or understanding how does the technology work. And it's not only about the computers, it's also about the cars that are self-parking and almost self-driving, and you don't need to use the manual transmission and so on.
And isn't that sort of augmentation already? Like that could help us focus on something different than just gaining the technical skill?
That I don't know. It could be. So if you know how to use the time and energy and effort that you saved by not learning these things or just not thinking about stuff that much, like if I want to ask a question, if I ask the language model, the AI language model, I don't really need to think too much about how am I asking, because most probably it will give me some sort of answer that pretends to be correct and understood, that my question was understood. If I use this time that I saved for something meaningful, then it could be an improvement. Or maybe we become more lazy, or maybe we do more of less valuable stuff. I mean, what I want to say is that this shift on its own doesn't mean much.
I would like maybe react on the question about the space, which is actually a concept in architecture from 19th century, and it becomes more and more visualized and used in 20th century, to the point where we actually, when we're talking about the architecture, we are talking about the space is a quality of space. However, when you start to design with this new extended realities in mind, you find out that the rules that you actually creating this architectural space are not valid anymore, or you have to very alter it. It's much more kind of cinematic space, so you need to learn new skills, essentially. And this space, the physical one, the architectural one, become one of the equation in wider pool of information that goes into this virtual physical concept. But what I find out about this second part, or the first part of the question about the interfaces, is that we always like talking about our reality and then the interface like a virtual reality. But there is something in between, actually the software as the creator use, and this interface of the software solution is actually bending your creative skills quite a lot. And we are usually not really aware of the idea that the software is really shaping our creativity power and actually our outputs. So you, in a very easy example, is that you actually could mark the buildings there where design is SketchUp, because you see it from the outside that it's kind of aesthetics of the software, more or less.
The same applies to Maya.
Yes, of course. It's whatever software you use.
Or tools, even the compass and the ruler.
Yeah.
Thank you. Very interesting question. For me, the future of spaces really, probably the concept that comes into mind is ubiquity. So we have all gone through an interesting experience with COVID, where we all studied from home, shopped from home, socialized from home, and did everything from home. Suddenly we broke the physical barriers that separates us from the external world. So really I'm talking as the architect here, we've seen over the centuries how the concept of a space has evolved. During the medieval times, a space was confined between heavy walls. We had the Romanesque architecture, then we moved to Gothic, with suddenly spaces were opened up. We had high cathedrals, windows, large windows. We went through a Renaissance where everything was governed by mathematics. Spaces became, with the Da Vinci Man, and then with the modernist time, with Le Corbusier, and suddenly the space kind of exploded. The space was freed. The physical barriers disappeared, and we had the open plan, etc. I think now the concept is evolving. The concept is evolving because we're moving into spaces where ubiquity is becoming the key word. I think as we did during the COVID period, really we can do everything from within a space. We had a project in the past called Future Spaces, and what we envisioned at the time is you're sitting in a place and suddenly you're immersed, like the metaverse. You're immersed into the environment that, you can be in a working environment. Suddenly, you're in a virtual world where you are as if, virtually as if you're interacting physically with them. So we need to have multimodal ways of interacting with spaces. Computers will disappear. Computers will be will be in the background, so yeah, I think very fascinating times. I think exciting times where the way I can see things is ubiquity is what will characterize the space of the future.
Thank you. If you want to add, you can.
Maybe one thing that I realized when you were talking about, I remember this notion. I've heard it somewhere. Maybe you know better where this comes from, but recently, or maybe the second half of the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st century, the architecture and interiors of architecture were designed so that they look good on a photograph. So it is also some way of distorting the approach because the means of communication was through magazines or online magazines. The architecture had to look good on a photograph, and maybe with the new technologies and new interfaces, maybe this will or is a change to the architecture itself, because perhaps when architecture could be observed in the virtual three-dimensional space where you can move and you don't have a perfectly staged shot, then it also changes how the architecture appears. And just one last anecdote. When I was studying with Hernán Díaz Alonso, he was basically saying that he designs his architecture, or he's not making computer renderings so that they look like real architecture, but he's designing real architecture so that it looks like it's a rendering, which also is quite a good challenge for the creative architect on its own.
Less of bumpy surfaces, no? Or more of bumpy surfaces.
Yeah, well yeah.
And shiny. The next question was if the drawing will eradicate, or the AI or new technologies will eradicate the drawing. But I guess you already mentioned it in your presentation before, that it's add-up thing, that it's edit tool, and it doesn't have to obviously eradicate anything. But the next question is like, with the growing field of artificial intelligence and its curious name itself, the question of authorship becomes more and more present. Where do you perceive boundaries, and what should we be afraid of? And this may be with all the tools available, not only AI, and authorship of software and authorship of the design. Martin?
It's a tough question. I mean, in the field of architecture and industrial design as well, this authorship is always kind of challenged, because you are, like, if you design a chair, it's quite complicated to bring up something really new. It's probably almost impossible. So you always work with something in mind. And of course, the digitalization just push it further, because in 90s or 2000, you have a Pinterest that actually, before that, you go to the library and try to find something in the magazines, and it was really challenging to find something, but you have curated stuff, so the quality was somehow curated. In the Pinterest, it's more or less on you, or on the some background processes that actually fulfilling your feelings about that, and they are not known to you, and it's a kind of manipulation of the social networks. And the AI paradigm probably brings it just further, because it is more, if we are too literal about it, these large language models works like simulacrum of the idea of the chair, which is like a perfect one for all seaters, essentially. And if you put there another word, chair for something, it becomes kind of millennium of all possibility chairs for these prompts. So it just it somehow we are losing kind of barriers, and we are not really pushed to ask hard questions, because these nice images are just served, and the chair become perfect from your point of view. But it doesn't really mean that it is really perfect for reality.
So there were two questions in, I think, the one about...
one was about the drawing.
Whether drawings will disappear or not. So I think from my perspective, everything will be model-based from now on. I think models are polymorphic. You can turn a model into anything you want based on the needs. Maybe drawing, maybe picture, maybe a cross-section of a building. So everything would be model-based, would be driven by models. And so I'm thinking here, again, BIM is not the right example, because BIM was designed as an exchange format between CAD applications, and then it evolved to become to underpin a description of a building. I think there will be new forms of semantics that would appear with ontologies, and the way ontologies are developing. And certainly drawings would become a byproduct of a model. And as you said, it's one source of truth. And that's what we want. And then from that source of truth, you can do whatever you want. Yeah, so that's my view about drawings. The second one was about...
The second one was, what do you perceive boundaries of authorship? Authorship with coming technologies.
Yeah, you mean authorship in creativity or...
In design.
In design, yeah. I strongly believe in AI, the role of artificial intelligence, but I wouldn't fully trust algorithms, because algorithms are developed by humans, and algorithms can learn based on the way you want them to learn, and they will react and behave as you have trained them, which can be quite biased. I mean, now we talk more and more about reinforced learning, and human reinforced learning. So I think if you want to use artificial intelligence to support whatever activity, then I strongly believe that the algorithms should be, if it's for application, I mean, as a human, you should be involved in the training of the algorithm and not only trust data, because data comes with biased information. So, yeah, my message is human reinforced learning. That's how I see things progressing with AI.
Yeah, I really like the idea with Pinterest and comparison, because it's similar with the magazines, that it's sort of inspiration, and ChatGPT tells you something new you haven't thought about. But anyway, that could happen listing magazine as well.
Just another thought that popped up in my mind. I was watching recently a new lecture by Joe Rezgui, and he says that with the Mid-Journey, you have an endless stream of architectural magazines. You can request whatever architecture you want to have as an inspiration. An endless stream of El Croquis magazine or whatever you want.
But without context. That's the only. You get the one-shot pictures as you are used to in magazines, without any additional information, which would be in the models or. Yeah.
And on top of it, all the Mid-Journey images, they look the same, and after a while I get really bored with them.
Hence we are coming to the second question, which is about information and processes, which you mentioned as important, and we can see them in AI as fast processing machine for information. And the first question is the core subject in new tools and approaches in the information and its handling. That can help optimization of processes, simulation of environments and behaviors, or managing various processes during the life cycle of building. How do you think this informational approach changes the design of spaces? Maybe this question for you, Yacine.
How information can change?
Approach changes the design of spaces.
Changes the design, yeah. Yeah, design is a multifaceted process. Design is quite complex, and And as designers, we tend to have our own beliefs, references when we approach design. We again tend to be driven by our own biases, which is so how AI can help that. I mean, we've seen the example. I mean, with your presentation, how I mean, design patterns is a very interesting concept. Where you have existing patterns and then you can plug and play, you can compose these patterns to come up with a new design. So I think that's probably what you've explained in your presentation. So it comes from an architect who wrote, So yeah, I think if we have the tools, the elementary tools that can help us to compose, compose these elementary concepts, or design patterns to deliver things that are more complex and fit a given need. I think AI can help us do that. I mean, machine learning, as we had a demonstration this afternoon, is a tool that can definitely help us achieve that goal. So I'm a strong believer in the design pattern approach when conceiving, when designing.
In my mind, maybe to elaborate the question, in my mind it's always this picture in Villa Tugendhat that you have this realization project, and this realization project, it looks like today's study. Like today's architectural study looks the same. There's no more information actually in informational level. And they had to go there every day actually to fill up the information to the workers, so it's built properly with such a detail it has. And in my mind, it's always like we are getting to the point where the ideas of modernists, where we should build some sort of ecological, perfect buildings, can get the data. And we are actually now, after 100 years, we are finally able to process the data and make it properly, not just say it and just draw it somehow like this is a fluent image of like Mid-Journey style, but we could actually properly build it in a way that the data, given data, is respected inside the design. So the question is maybe like if you feel this in the new technologies, in the BIM modeling, in the digital twin modeling, that if you feel this sort of ability to handle much more data and to be much more precise in your design and to address the design needs more perfectly? Or
absolutely, I fully agree. I think data is everything. I would probably contrast two things: data and the models that we can develop thanks to the data, the models that can help us simulate, mimic physical phenomena. So this is where the data becomes powerful, because the data can help us develop models that can mimic, again, real phenomena. And the best example for that is, I'll use the concept of a simulation model. So there are different ways of developing a simulation model. You can develop a simulation model, again, by using the BIM spaces, and then through an energy simulation tool, you develop that model. But you can't afford, I mean, if you look at the number of buildings we have, just in Slovakia, you can't develop a model for every single building to decarbonize it. That's impossible. So this is where data becomes interesting, because you can use the data to develop a model that's not probably very sophisticated, but it's sufficient to deliver the carbon savings that you're after, or the performance savings that you are after. So this is where we see the power of data. The data can be used to develop models, to calibrate models, and then use these models to inform decision-making. So suddenly we can make better decisions about. And the data also can get us out of the siloed approach where I'm an architect, I'm only concerned with architecture, aesthetics, functional aspects. I'm a structural engineer, I'm only concerned about the stability of my structure. I'm an HVAC engineer, but the data can bring all these disciplines together, and suddenly you start thinking out of the box. You have an interdisciplinary perspective into things, and given the complexity of the problem we're facing, this is a must. We need to think really out of the box. So data will enable us to do that. Quality of the data is important, but again, there are machine learning algorithms that can help you fill in data gaps whenever you have these data gaps.
Or handle the data.
Or handle, yeah, absolutely. So we've done that, especially with energy models. When we get data from sensors, we always get noise in the data we get. So there are algorithms that we can apply that can fill in the gaps and produce something that's sensible. That's me.
We can go to another question if...
Yeah, sure.
Yep.
Sure, why not?
It's okay.
Yeah.
More information helps to precisely manage more complex tasks. Hence the exposition of the results from the paperless workshop, what we have downstairs. This helps use more sophisticated fabrication in place. And we can observe GPS tags or prefabricated parts or 3D printed houses. What do you think is the next step and how it will change the new spaces? So how are the forms going to be shifted? What is the architecture look like with the new technologies, with the new approaches, new prefabrications, new tools?
Yes, it might be. I mean the problem of this fabrication that comes from computer to computer. I think we are really at the beginning of the journey, while in this data-driven part of design, we are much farther. We are talking now about AI, but actually, for example, in concrete printing, we don't have concrete that actually holds right now, really. So you are like 10-degree wall.
That's why we used reinforced concrete.
But what I try to say that this materialization, it's much more complicated than in the real life. In the real life, than to make a materialization in the virtual life. And I will maybe go back to this problem of the pencil drawing. That it's supposed to be obsolete in a way, but it's not about the drawing. Like I'm now talking about the creative drawing, not the plans. And this creative drawing, in one way, it's a skill, but you can learn it. But on the other way, it's a way of thinking about the problem. These computational methods, it's a way of thinking about the problem, and to find. And when we say that, I mean, the pencil drawing is just done. It might be true, but then we are losing one way how to think about the problem. It's not about the skill, but about the idea behind. And I think when we do here this small materialization researches with the student, they find out how complicated it actually goes to these details, because it's very different from if you go through the drawing and to the reality, because in drawing it's kind of lost and you're still actually thinking about the man who is taking the brick and put it in the place, and he's solving the problem mainly. And I think with this concrete printing and other this additive or whatever technology driven by computer, this AI actually could bring this solution based on site, because the complexity of the physical world is such that we probably are not going to solve it inside the computer, but it must be calculated on the site. And I don't know, there are some examples, but we are just far away, I think, from this point of view.
Sorry if I may. Before the Cubu, I was involved in a concrete 3D printing. I worked with a company who takes it very, very seriously, and they are developing 3D printing, concrete 3D printing solution for architecture. And one thing is that it doesn't really hold. That's true, or it does under certain circumstances. But my general and they are improving the technology every day, and it's getting better and better. So I believe that at a certain point this will actually work really well. But then my general problem with specifically with concrete 3D printing was that I never understood what is the benefit of doing things that way. Because no matter from which point I approached that, I couldn't see that this is any better than basically any other option that you have. It doesn't work without the human operator, without very highly qualified person or personnel that operates. It doesn't allow for larger buildings, or it doesn't really save that much material. You know, it doesn't really, it never made sense to me. But at the same time, I have to say that it was very interesting from another point of view, because it seemed like the usual argument for 3D printing is that once you can 3D print, you can basically build anything because you can design anything, and the printer basically prints it. It doesn't work that way. Obviously, it doesn't even work with the filament plastic additive printers that you can have on your table. But it works vice versa. You need to design your objects so that they are printable. And that completely changes the paradigm. A straight wall is not very suitable for a concrete 3D printing, whereas a waved wall is much more suitable, and it affects how your buildings actually look. And this, on its own, this itself, for me, is a good reason for actually using concrete 3D printing, because it makes your architecture look different. It changes what is a rational choice. And if you add more and more technologies like this, it might change what architecture looks like, because the most natural and simple shape is not what we are used to. But going back to your original question, just very briefly, I believe that using computation and data and all sorts of computer-aided optimization will affect the construction industry, but differently than we expect. I don't think that eventually the 3D printing will be the next way of producing, of building houses, but I think this will affect the process on different stages. So it will affect the logistics, it will affect the efficiency, things that are not directly connected with bricklaying. So things that are behind. Just think about how do we do shopping right now? So it's so highly optimized, but it's mainly the logistics. You order your things, whatever it is, somebody puts it in a box that is right under your house, and you collect it whenever you want. So this is how the computation changed the shopping. It's not that the things look different or they're cheaper or whatever. They're just the process is different, and the same is inevitably happening in the construction industry as well. But it might not be visible.
Yeah, I wanted to add another examples as informed materials, or let's say managing buildings, but there we will get there. Yeah. So the next question: not only new materialities, but as well environmental simulations can help to adjust the design towards optimized sustainability during the whole life cycle. How else can we await? What else can we await in the future? So maybe in question of sustainability. And in my mind, there is always this gray energy. It's often like forget in design process. And I don't know, in Slovakia, we start to talk about life cycles. I guess in UK, we have a much elaborated discussion about life cycle. How do you perceive this question of gray energy, and how computation could really add to it? Could we have all materials labeled and computable, let's say, in a way?
Yeah, I think certainly, I think technology is there really to, I mean, I'm trying to use a metaphor here. You could imagine having a dashboard with all the life cycle assessment indicators or categories, and then you're progressing with your design from, you have a site, you have constraints with your site, orientation, etc. As you're progressing with your massing, the dashboard is informing you about the implications of the shapes, the massing, orientation that you are. So again, AI will not take the job of the architect. We need architects, but will provide really real-time informed decision-making about the interventions that are being planned and promote optioneering. You can look at different options and very quickly look at the consequences and the impact each option generates. So I very much, the way sustainability works now, the architect does his design, and then at the end when the concept is firmed up, then there's a mechanical engineer or energy person that comes and does all the BREEAM and leads or whatever and profiles the building. It should really be part of the design process. I mean, the architect should continuously be informed about the consequences of his design options and be able then to iterate, to improve, and as he or she goes. So this is what technology should do, really. It should. So for me, sustainability is not a linear process. It's more a continuously iterative process, and you have to always to question the implications of your design.
Next question?
Next question, please.
No, because I mean, okay. You really, I mean, close it up. One thing maybe, it's towards your lecture as well, that that you point out there this human aspect of the.
Yes.
So if you can.
Yeah, absolutely. This is something very important. I mean, when we look at materials, I mean, buildings are made of materials, you know, of components. These components are sourced. We seeing buildings that are more and more using sensors, controllers, actuators. These are made of rare earth that are sourced in questionable conditions. So if we claim that we are sustainable, I've said it before, sustainability is not only about reducing your carbon footprint, it's looking about human condition and ways in which your buildings are built. When I look at the World Cup in Qatar and the number of deaths, you know, so that's not right. That's not right. So sustainability should factor in also the human dimension of the act of building. So it starts from sourcing materials and it carries on throughout the life cycle of a project. So I think that's why more and more we hear, and you'll hear that, I think, as students, and the concept of social LCA. So social LCA is becoming now more and more important. And you measure the sustainability of a building, not only, again, using the traditional impact indicators, but now the social dimension will more and more take importance.
Yeah, thank you. I was thinking, as you've been saying about these electric cars and also copper drainage that they use. Yeah. But you're totally right that with simulation we could actually replace all these sensors that are not needed.
Yeah, virtualizing sensors is the future.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think something we've done quite nicely using computational fluid dynamics really is, using CFD models, you can address any point in your space. And so we have to develop models, the CFD model, train it, obviously. And then you could really address any point in your space and say, give me the temperature at a given time, humidity, CO2 levels. It does a good job. We're about to publish a paper that demonstrates this. So I think we should, I mean, the European Commission is taking an approach which I disagree with, which is they've come up with the concept, in fact, there are friends of mine who came up with the concept of smart readiness indicator of a building. So the assumption is the more you embed sensors in a building, the more intelligent it is and the more energy efficient it will be. But we tend to forget about the embodied carbon that these sensors come with. Again, the operational carbon they use because they work on batteries, they consume energy. So really the future is to virtualize these sensing nodes and have models that can, I mean, cloud hosting also consumes energy, but we've looked at the load of hosting data on the cloud, and it's really, the future is in virtualizing these sensing infrastructures. The IoT should be virtualized.
And also it has this capability of simulating the possible scenarios, as you shown in your presentation, This reminds me, there was the research of virtual bodies for the doctors, that they could actually customize our medication through simulation of our virtual body and then apply it to the real body, so that it doesn't make any damage to you, or less damage than it would be just by like conceptual one. So
Absolutely.
maybe that's the way of censoring.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Cool. Do you want to add up? No. Okay, it's okay. So you have the next question, I guess. More information also means more variables, parameters taken into account. This brings more fields together in closer collaboration. Interdisciplinarity is usually a huge benefit in research. How this will influence the future spatial design?
The more information you have, the better decisions you can make. So,
I was meaning maybe more of like the more information you use, the more interdisciplinarity you get, and the more fields you have to just like touch at least, and the more people you have to communicate with, and you get it more and more informed in that way.
I believe this is for you. You've been talking about disciplinarity.
Yep, you can.
I think data is important as far as you understand the context of the data, hence the semantic models. And I strongly believe in serendipitous fact discovery. So when you have semantic models that are not limited to a domain such as energy or water, but they cut across domains, then really that promotes serendipitous information discovery. So you will discover things you're not expecting. And this is where the power of graph databases, semantics, I mean, all the ontologies that we see now. So having lots of data is not a problem. Again, as far as you have computers that can process the data, computers need to understand the context, hence why we have BIM applied to the building, but then BIM on its own doesn't do the job. You need more ontologies, more semantics. But certainly data, I've presented the stack, the IoT stack, which is quite common. Data, semantics, intelligence, and then services, which you make at the disposal of architects and other. Yeah, so data, I insist on context. Data on its own doesn't mean much, you can do. But if you give context to the data, and you have a semantic network of how the data links one to another, that's very powerful.
But it comes with the idea, as you mentioned before, that the architect stops doing only decisions based on the fields he's used to as aesthetics, but makes informed decisions. As you were presenting, for example, daylight factor and all these like environmental factors which are included in the designs have a huge impact. And this makes and maybe my question is also like, if you believe, in my practice, when you get deep enough to the, let's say, fields that treat this, you start to feel the functions of data that are most typical. You start to see patterns, and you can then freely work with them, like use them as inspiration or use them as a lead towards some direction, more than just like a bunch of numbers, for example.
I feel obliged to answer your question because you were addressing me, and I don't really know if I can answer or what can I add to the claim that we collect way more information that we did before, and it means that we need more expertise to actually evaluate the data and put it into the context. But throughout the whole conference, I've been thinking about one thing. We are all talking about revolutionizing the architecture and the construction industry through computation, and I strongly believe this is necessary and inevitable, and we've seen it in other disciplines as well. Just in medicine, now they practice something that they called evidence-based medicine. And for me, it was a surprise that this is a new concept. It's been around for 20 years or so. what was there before. What was it gas, or what was it experience without any sort of evidence? And then in architecture, there are many buildings or many pieces of architecture that somebody claimed that it's a rational decision that they made without any evidence. Now we can have the evidence right now. Another thing that comes to my mind is the digitization itself, like becoming digital, which is now happening in the construction industry. In architecture, it's been around for a while, but in the construction industry, not that much. And it's rapidly happening right now. We see that when we are talking to the contractors and supply producers, they go towards the digitization. And again, we see that also in other disciplines, like, for example, the finance, the fintech is a huge market or like, part of the economy. The banking, the first thing that you need to do when you are going to ask for a loan or a mortgage, first thing that they tell you at the bank is install our app. That's the first thing that you need to do. In the construction industry, this is happening right now as well. But that all being said, don't get me wrong, I still believe that we should, the society, the clients, individual people should also encourage the individual genius of architect to take the very soft pencil and draft something that is a genius thing that we can think about, and that should be also something that is being built, or maybe just the Open Grasshopper or Maya, and just create something that is a genius piece of art without any need to explain that on data. But there is still a majority of production in the construction industry and architecture where the claim has been around, but it was not based on the data. And now we do have the data, and we are obliged to use the data.
That's a really good point, to somehow like bring the evidence and get out demons that are like changing, that we are having in the buildings actually since 100 years. And with what you mentioned and this subject as well with the data, I would come back to the pencil. You mentioned what was the question actually in the beginning, that pencil gives you certain simplification which sets you in a mood that you prioritize what's important and you focus on some subject. On the opposite, there is a BIM model which has too much information and it can distract you actually from the prioritizing. And I see, for example, the project you presented as sort of like a melange between the two, that you can get the information righteously and you don't make them up, or the thickness of your pencil won't make them up, but it's more about like you still can have these informed decisions without too much thinking of the very information and too much data, and it gives you some sort of bigger picture.
Yeah, that's the intention, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so I got it right. Martin, do you want to add? Nothing. Okay, so and the last question there is like last question for the third part. We have fourth. Okay. Too much optimization and statistical repetition, which we can observe in machine learning, can limit creativity. Do you think that new technologies can suppress thinking outside the box? And I guess we just answered this question, so I would go for the next one. Future spaces. Our needs and behaviors change, and along with them the spaces as well. But also new technologies are stepping into our lives. House as a machine, as Corbusier stated, seems even more present in our Roombas wandering through living rooms. Do you think the spaces will evolve with the Internet of Things and other similar platforms? Maybe that's for Yacine with simulating sensors and Roombas.
Sure. Yeah, I think we can spend probably hours discussing the concept of a house as a machine, because yeah, I think the assumption Le Corbusier took was that a human being, the average human being, is 1.83 meters, is healthy, is through the modular, I mean the proportions he came up with. but we're dealing with a generation of population that's different. Obviously, we have lots of people are disabled. We have an aging population. People live longer. So I think a house shouldn't be as a machine. A house should facilitate, or should be adaptable to the conditions of people. I mean, again, we should move away from the stereotype of a human being being healthy, young, etc. So adaptability is the key word here. I think we need to ensure that houses are adaptable. Adaptability is something that can evolve over time. And yeah, we need to rethink ways in which we think about spaces, about houses, to factor in the fact that we're dealing with a diverse population, with diverse needs, diverse conditions, and yeah, I think I'm quite interesting to see that with the COVID pandemic, indoor spaces were the most prone for contamination. You know, to feel safe, you have to go outside the house. Well, not your house, but public spaces. So contaminations took place inside public spaces. It's quite interesting because you're supposed to be safe indoor, and suddenly you can catch a virus if you're indoor, like we are here now. Obviously, now we all have a level of immunity that is immunity is good. But yeah, so back to your point. I mean, we need to rethink about spaces in terms of the occupants and the assumptions we took so far, whether the Da Vinci Man, whether the modular from Le Corbusier. I think we need to move away from this type of stereotypes of a human being. We need to be more inclusive, more spaces have to be more adaptable to different needs and different people. So.
Thank you. And adaptability and scalability, or maybe scale of people as modular, that's also your subject of research?
I mean, definitely, but when we're talking about house as a machine, I think in this Corbusian way, this mechanical machine, I mean, this idea is done. I don't think it's we can discuss it anymore, since because of the COVID, actually, we find out that this digital realm is where the new spaces or this new, I mean, machine lies, and it's from Uhrík from 60s actually the idea.
It was more about this Internet of Things and new technologies coming to our lives. If this changes the points, if it validates the concepts.
Yes, but I mean, this is just kind of service stuff. But where I mean, Marshall McLuhan said, with the TV in mind, that actually you're watching the TV, so your space is now in the middle of the safari in Africa, because you are watching the movie about Africa and you are there. And it was not so hot medium actually as he think it is, because when you are on the social networks from Instagram and TikTok, like my kids, it's just they're completely out of space, physical one, and they really don't care what kind of lighting is dimming over them. It's just, I don't think this material part is really so valid anymore. But what I think is really that this physical part of the building should be redeveloped to be somehow more engaging or inspiring for them, not to really left for the virtual. So maybe this Internet of Things might somehow make it even more funny than Instagram, but I don't see the light at the end of the tunnel.
I don't know if I want to say it publicly, but I just had this moment of enlightenment. I just realized something while you were speaking. I gave you a question after your lecture. What is the architecture about? And it comes from this. I feel like I've been away from the discipline of architecture for a couple of years, also during the COVID and all the situation, and due to my work that was slightly different for a while. And when I came back, it feels like the architecture, when I left the field, I never left it, but when I stopped caring so much, when I was going away, it all looked futuristic. Everything was like Zaha Hadid stuff and designed in Maya, and everything looked like from the future. Then for 5 years, I wasn't really following any magazines, and I came back, and everything looks like from the 60s suddenly. And it's like the normcore is the new thing. And the moment that I had right now, what you were saying, it explains it. Now I think I understood, because the physical presence of the architecture, it's trying to remind the simple old times or the simulacrum of those, because the future is now happening in the virtual environment, and the built architecture is the old simple, very easy to comprehend space. It seems like people are striving for this. That people actually want to have a simple house because it's easy to understand.
Isn't it something like a leather cover for your iPhone? Like you have this sort of
actually, I do have
handmade identity, which brings you back from the virtual world, as you mentioned, from the new technology, which is
maybe
unidentified.
I'm just making things up right now, but it sort of explains things like the hype of like the fascination with the future, with the science fiction, with the technology. It seems to be over, and maybe it is over due to the pandemic, because at that point we relied on that so much that it really became a usual thing. Having a Zoom call is super usual. Now I had 7 of those yesterday, for example, and it is around, and it's not like, it's not something special anymore. Technology is not special anymore. It's around, and technology is not what is making us excited. I think that's what I don't know what the future is, but right now the technology is the usual, and it's not the future. It is what is now. It's not what we are expecting.
Yep. That comes to the last question actually, and it is for everybody, and it's like about saying what is the space, because it's redefined by all these happenings, late or new, and there's a question like, what is the future of space? What is it going to be? Is it augmented? Is it old-fashioned? Is it combination? Is it going to change formally more? Maybe you started to answer this question already, but...
No, I'm asking the question. I really want to know. You tell me.
Sorry, I'll start first. So for me, the future of space, design for all, that is the next move. I think we need to design for all. When we design spaces, we need to design them in a way that they are inclusive, that they're fit for the people with disabilities, and there's so many in our society. People who are aging, again, we have a population that lives longer, obviously thanks to progress in medicine and other. So the key word for me is design for all. That's the key thing. And then, as I said initially, ubiquity is something we need to think about. Spaces, we're educated with the concept of one space, one function. I think now we need to think of spaces as being multifunctional, and again, keeping the technology in the background, not being invasive. Technology can help us feel as if we are, in different situations, different concepts, as and when we work, we socialize. So yeah, I think design for all. This is the thing I would personally retain in relation to spaces.
I will take it from the bit different point of view, but I think it will be a bit connected, because we try to design for kind of extended spaces, so we go from the physical to the virtual, and then you find out that the objects and spaces in virtual and physical are kind of different part, because in the physical space is more or less defined very strictly, but in a virtual term you can scale it, change it, it becomes creative entity. It can be actually cinematized and manipulated, but what actually is connected these two words is our body. So in one way, those aging bodies that will be here in the physical world needs this approach of the easy to move around and be inclusive. and we need to find out concept of the body the same kind of inclusive in this virtual world, but because right now it's more or less with this all this social networking and such a stuff and this environment and this, I would say, the virtual space of our society is just going higher and more aggressive because how we think about that. But I think this new narrative is not anymore about the space, but about the body and how you really perceive your body in the physical one space and in the virtual one. So I think this paradigm is shifting from the space to the body. I don't know. What do you think about it?
Okay. I guess we touched the final question. Thank you for your presence and for your answers. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your questions.
Go.